It started like any other day. Someone woke up, walked down the hallway, and stepped into the bathroom. The lights turned on. The mirror fogged slightly. Nothing unusual. In the other room, a small disc-shaped machine hummed softly. It rolled along the floor, avoiding chair legs, sliding under tables, doing exactly what it had done hundreds of times before. It didn't beep. It didn't flash a warning. It didn't ask permission. It simply moved, quietly mapping the room as it always had. To the person living there, the device barely existed anymore. It had become part of the background, like a thermostat or a smoke detector, something you trust enough to stop thinking about. The machine didn't know it was in a bathroom. It didn't know what privacy was. It didn't know it was capturing a moment meant for no one else. It was doing its job. Later, somewhere far away, an image would appear on a screen, not in real time, not watched deliberately, just stored, reviewed, and passed along as part of a routine process. No one panicked, no alarms went off, no security system failed. No one realized anything had gone wrong, because nothing looked broken. This robot vacuum, from a company called iRobot, was the Roomba J7 in early testing. Its job was simple: clean floors without bumping furniture or getting stuck. The device at the center of this story was designed to clean floors. That's it. It wasn't meant to spy. It wasn't meant to watch people. It wasn't meant to remember moments. Its job was simple: move around a home without bumping into things. To do that, newer models used a small camera, not for recording memories, but for navigation. Think of it like a person walking with their eyes half open. They're not studying paintings on the wall. They're just trying not to trip over a chair. The camera helped the vacuum recognize obstacles: shoes, pets, furniture. It could tell the difference between a wall and a pile of clothes. That made it better at cleaning and less likely to get stuck. The images weren't supposed to matter. They were just a means to an end, like rough notes scribbled on scrap paper. To improve the system, that meant showing examples of what real homes looked like. So some images were reviewed by humans, not customers, contract workers. Their job was to label what the camera saw. This is a chair. This is a table. This is a pet. It was like training a very literal intern, one that only learns by being shown thousands of examples. The system wasn't designed to understand homes. It was designed to understand shapes, and that difference mattered more than anyone expected. The key assumption was quiet and almost invisible. People assumed the system knew what not to look at, not in a technical sense, in a human sense. They assumed that a camera inside a home would naturally avoid moments that were private, that if something sensitive appeared, it would be filtered out, ignored, deleted. This felt reasonable. After all, humans do this instinctively. If you accidentally glance into a bathroom, you look away. If you see something personal, you don't stare. So it felt natural to believe a smart device would behave the same way. There were policies, there were rules, there were agreements about privacy. The company believed the images were handled carefully. Customers believed their homes were safe. And technically, many safeguards existed, but there was a subtle gap between what people meant and what the system understood. The camera didn't know what a bathroom was. It didn't know what clothing meant. It didn't know what embarrassment was. It only knew patterns. To the system, a human body was just another object in a room, no different from a chair, except in shape. The assumption wasn't that the AI was malicious. It was that it was considerate, that it would somehow grasp context without being told. And that assumption stayed unchallenged for a long time, because nothing bad seemed to be happening until it was. The turning point wasn't dramatic. There was no breach, no hacker, no sudden malfunction. It was a routine data collection process. Images captured by the vacuum were sent for review. This was normal. It was part of improving the product. Some of those images came from real homes, unfiltered, uncropped. In a few cases, the images showed people, not posed, not aware, not consenting in the moment. Someone had stepped out of the shower. Someone had used the bathroom. Someone had been captured in an intimate situation. The system didn't flag these images as special. It didn't pause. It didn't stop. Why would it? From its perspective, these were just scenes, visual information to be processed like any other. The humans reviewing the images noticed. Some saved them, some shared them in private groups, not because the system told them to, because the system allowed it. The moment that changed everything wasn't a single image. It was the realization that nothing prevented this from happening. No technical barrier had failed. No rule had been broken by the machine. It had followed its instructions exactly, and that's what made it unsettling. The AI didn't spy. It observed. That distinction matters. It didn't choose moments. It didn't didn't target people. It didn't understand what it was seeing. It captured images because it was designed to capture images, and those images were treated as training material. Training data is like a workbook. You fill it with examples so the system learns patterns. But imagine if your workbook accidentally included private diary pages. Not because someone wanted them there, but because no one said they couldn't be. That's what happened. The AI recorded scenes without knowing their meaning. Those scenes were stored. Some were reviewed by humans to label objects. The system didn't blur faces automatically. It didn't block certain rooms. It didn't understand nudity or privacy. Those are human ideas. To the AI, a bathroom was just another room with hard surfaces. A human body was just another shape. The exposure didn't come from the AI sharing information publicly. It came from the workflow around it. Permissions allowed humans to see raw images, and humans, unlike machines, recognized what they were looking at. The system didn't hallucinate or invent anything. It showed exactly what it captured. That was the problem. It wasn't imagining. It wasn't guessing. It was being precise. Nothing broke. That's why no one noticed. The vacuum worked. Customers were satisfied. Floors were clean. From a technical standpoint, the system performed well. The images were stored where they were supposed to be. Access was granted according to internal rules. Logs showed normal activity. There was no spike in errors, no sudden change in behavior. The system didn't crash. It didn't leak data publicly, so there was no obvious signal that something was wrong. The problem lived in the space between systems, between automation and human review, between what was allowed and what felt acceptable. Trust filled that gap. Trust that workers would behave responsibly. Trust that policies were enough. Trust that a cleaning device wouldn't capture moments like these. And because nothing failed loudly, the issue stayed quiet until someone spoke up. The story came to light through reporting. Journalists were tipped off that images from inside homes were circulating. Not publicly, but internally. Investigations followed. The images were real. The scenarios were real. The homes belonged to real people. The reporting showed that these were not isolated accidents. They were part of a system that hadn't drawn a clear boundary. When the story became public, it felt shocking. Not because of how advanced the technology was, but because of how ordinary the failure was. This wasn't a futuristic nightmare. It was a mundane oversight. A camera doing what it was told. People assuming someone else had handled the hard part. The company responded. They acknowledged the issue. They changed policies. They limited access to images. Certain data collection practices were adjusted. Some human review processes were reduced or removed. Customers were reminded of privacy controls. Options were clarified, but not everything could be undone. Images had already been captured. Trust had already been shaken. The device didn't change overnight, but the conversation around it did. Companies became more cautious. Regulators paid closer attention, and consumers started asking new questions, not about intelligence, but about boundaries. The lesson is simple. AI doesn't understand privacy. It doesn't know what matters. It doesn't know what's sensitive. It doesn't know when to stop unless we tell it. The system didn't fail because it was careless. It failed because it was literal. It followed instructions without judgment, because judgment wasn't part of the design. Privacy isn't a default setting. It's a choice that has to be built, tested, and enforced. And assumptions are not safeguards. The vacuum never changed its behavior. It rolled, it mapped, it cleaned. The failure wasn't sudden. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. The system didn't fail because it was smart. It failed because we trusted it to understand things it never could. Not intentions, not context, not dignity, just instructions, and it followed them perfectly.